So today we're going to continue the conversation on connecting to your inner queen. And the topic of today is a queen's flow, the art of receiving and giving and being in flow. And I have a very special guest today, a dear friend of mine, infinite coach, my spiritual guru and teacher, Mr. Oren Harris. Hi, Oren.
Hello.
So I really want to speak to you today about the Queen's Flow, which is really the art of receiving and giving, and the blocks that a lot of women have in this area, because I feel like it is a hot topic. A lot of people are talking about it, but I know you've taught me a lot of things that, other teachers aren't really talking about. So first of all, I want to start with the question, what does it feel like to you when a woman is in receiving mode and when that energy of masculine feminine is really balanced from a man's perspective?
Yeah, for sure. Great question, by the way. It feels delicious. It feels alive. It feels inspiring. It feels intriguing. There's sort of a mystery to it. I think the deeper the receiving is, it's literally like, it's like a vortex. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. It draws you in.
It draws you in, and it feels like a vortex of goodness that is rich.
Mm.
Yeah.
And how often do you experience women like that?
Not often enough. Not often enough.
It seems like a rarity, isn't it?
Yeah, if we're talking statistically, I would say for sure it's rare.
Yeah.
It's
I
rare,
think a
and
lot.
I have my theories about that. But go ahead.
I was going to say, I think a lot of women may come and go into that vortex, but not necessarily really living there.
Yeah, for sure.
So what is your theory?
Well, I mean, I probably have a few theories, but one theory about, like, my theory about why that's rare,
Yeah.
is it's just kind of our collective evolution, of the relationship between men and women and masculine and feminine. We could go way back with that, and how the collective perception, opinion, attitude, and feeling about women and their place in society, in community, and man's, even back to like the hunter-gatherer energy and nurturer energy. It feels like those are like archetypes almost, but they're like embedded in our consciousness somewhere, and the collective idea. The good news is that any individual, or really even collectively, nobody has to be subject to the collective belief system or the collective idea about that. And I guess that's where the empowerment conversation comes in. But I feel like it traces way back to that.
Can you just touch on and explain to those women who may not be really familiar with that energy, masculine, feminine? In our world, we get what that means, but can you explain how everyone has a bit of both and how that plays a part in our consciousness?
Yeah, masculine energy is masculine energy is more will oriented. It's a more focused energy. It's a more defined energy. It's a more pointed energy. It's a more accomplished, task oriented, goal oriented intent. It's very physicalized in that way. Physical in a literal sense of like building things and doing things. That's the action element. But even if you step back from the action element, just from a level of intention, it's very forward moving. It's progressive. It's whereas the feminine energy is more like the infinite. It's more open. It's more vast, which is what makes it more mysterious, and which is also what makes it so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So the power of the feminine energy and the way that power gets expressed and experienced is different than the way that the power gets expressed and experienced through the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and yes, we do, because we're all infinite beings, we have aspects of masculine and feminine within us. And I guess part of, you could call it a spiritual awakening, you could call it evolution, you could call it whatever you want. Part of our evolution as spiritual beings, having a body, mind, and spirit, I think is coming in touch with and harmonizing and integrating the masculine and feminine aspects of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that in many ways, consciously and unconsciously.
So at what point did that become so off balance? And I know you just touched on it a little bit before, but how did we get like this?
That's a deep question, that can be approached from so many different angles, but I think that it's like conditioning.
Yeah.
We've just been conditioned. And it's not even, you could also look at the relationship between masculine and feminine energy the same way you could look at the relationship between the mind and the spirit, or the mind and the heart. The great battle or union between the mind and the heart that's occurring. And even looking at, like, if you even look at the economy and the general flow of our economy in the marketplace of the world, even that is mirroring this evolution. Right. We're in the industrial age, and in the industrial age, everything was more cookie cutter. There was less innovation, because innovation starts to tap into the feminine energy, the creative energy, that, intuitive energy. Things were more cookie cutter and more about, like, let's just reproduce. It's like production. It was all physical. Then we move into the age of the information. So, like, we move into the mind now, and the frontier of the mind, and information and knowledge. And some of that knowledge has also given us knowledge about the feminine energy,
Yeah.
And so it's like I would say that we're moving into the age of intuition, which is another way of saying that the feminine energy is awakening and trying to come into balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we've overly relied on the masculine energy.
Yeah.
And so now it's seeking to come into balance inside of us and collectively.
Yeah. And balance is the key word here as well, because what happens when a woman goes too far the other way? From my experience,
well, too far.
Done.
Yeah, if you go too far, to the left, which you could say is the. What would you call it? Would you call it too far? You call it into the feminine? Too far what?
Too far into that feminine mode and not relying on the masculine at all. It's just too much in receiving mode. And maybe you argue that that's not possible, but I feel like women go from really, really masculine, relying on this energy, to be like, okay, something's wrong here, and then they go all the way to the other, and they don't have the balance.
I agree.
Yeah.
Before I say anything about that, though, and this is why you probably sense that I disagree with that, because when you say they go too far and it gets out of balance, what you're implying is that there's a balance point, right? And what you're implying, too, is that there's a level of consciousness, awareness, and knowingness of self that would have you know what too far is. But the reason I didn't want to jump into that is because it's like, that's a huge assumption. Because without the level of consciousness and awareness, you lack the discernment to even say what too far is. So most women and people in general will say, I've gone too far, based upon the pain they're experiencing and the consequence. And then they go, oh, this consequence happened during when I was way over here in my receiving. So therefore, I must have gone too far. That's I think that's a bad place to start.
And I caught myself then, and why I said you probably disagree is because when I said, I see the feminine as the receiving mode, and it's not just about that, but it's mostly receiving. So when I'm saying you've received too much, I mean, that's ridiculous. How can that's putting boundaries around receiving? It's control again.
It is. And here's the thing. Receiving, it's not that receiving, it's vast. That's what's so beautiful about the feminine. It includes everything. And so if you're in receiving mode and you have intentions, right? And those intentions, you could say, are shaping the flow of your world. When you're in receiving mode and you have intentions and you're actually in touch with yourself and you really are in receiving mode, let's just try to say like you're deeply in receiving, then your spirit, your intuition, along with the universe and everything else, is guiding you to take action or not take action, to know when to move or not move, which is the balance that you're seeking. And that's why it's a huge assumption, because, or it seems like, if you're fully in receiving mode, here, let's just make up some real scenarios. If a woman's in quote unquote receiving mode and then she experiences the pain, because it really is pain that also creates the desire for balance. Pain, not pain like physical pain, but pain like, wow, I didn't get stuff done. Oh my God, my business shut down. Whatever, I lost a relationship. All these negative associations with being in receiving mode, which has us draw these conclusions, which has us seek balance, right? So if a woman's in receiving mode and she's really deeply receiving and she has intentions, then she doesn't have to rely only on her own resources. Her resources are her own skills, knowledge, ability, and her own perception. But what happens is, and the reason why it seems like this could be one of many missing pieces to this equation is your beliefs, because you could be in receiving mode but be holding a belief that says, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. And if you're holding that belief in your consciousness, even while you're receiving in receiving mode, first of all, it's affecting, if there was a scale of receiving and you throw that belief into it and you were at a level 10 and you throw that belief into it, it might drop you to a level 5. So technically, you're no longer, this is what I was saying to you last night. It's not saying you're either receiving or you're not receiving.
Yeah.
To say, you know, my level of receiving, just imagine how vast the universe is, how vast God is, how much we're loved, and how abundant this insanely beautiful universe is. That's the scope of receiving. And so to put it into a tangible scale, we could just look at a spectrum of receiving.
Yeah.
So that belief, if you have that belief, it's still affecting your receiving. Even if you go, I'm physically not engaged, I'm not doing anything, I'm just relaxing. If that belief's lurking in the back of your consciousness, then you're going to prove to yourself that it's dangerous to be in receiving mode, because if somebody comes by and tries to do something for you, and you're holding on to that belief, which says, when I do things and I get things done, it feels positive and great, and when I don't, it feels negative. If that's really charged in your consciousness, then you'll be in quote unquote receiving mode, and you'll need something done, and the universe, some guy, a bird, like the universe will be coming along to try to support you on that, and you won't see it. You won't receive it. And then that thing won't get done. And then you'll prove to yourself and reinforce the belief that's in your unconscious that says, I have to do it or it won't get done. So you see what I'm saying? So there's a level of receiving that's at play. But that's one of the reasons why I'm hesitant to talk about balance without bringing more awareness of what's going on in our consciousness.
Yeah. And also how connected it is to love and receiving love.
So say more about that.
When you were just talking and then you kind of like went like this to demonstrate love, it made me see that. I mean, that is one of the biggest blocks we have. And if we're controlling this, and you know, we had this conversation recently, if we have control and boundaries around this and only allowing a certain amount of love in, then that affects everything.
Right. It's kind of that. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's when the danger points come in, where we think that receiving doesn't feel good as well because of situations around that.
Yeah, and that again affects your perception of balance, and it affects your receiving, and it affects how much life can cooperate and collaborate and support you in whatever your intention may be while you're in receiving mode. And that's why most women tend to go fully in receiving mode when they believe and they literally, physically don't have anything they have to do. So then, but that's a limited version of receiving. And this, I'm not saying it's bad, because it's very regenerative, it's very relaxing, and it's very good on the body, mind, and spirit. But in this conversation of expanding your capacity to receive, that poses a limitation, because then you can only be in receiving mode when you, which is still your control, when you don't have anything to do, or when nothing really is at stake. Then you're allowing yourself to be more in receiving mode. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. I also see it as well that there's some women that they're very, they can receive from the universe or from God in one area of their life, but not the other as well. So there are some women, they may have very successful businesses and money flows into their life, and they're like, yeah, I'm in receiving mode, I'm abundant and prosperous, but then maybe in their love life or family life or relationships, things aren't so great or whatever. So is that going back to the control?
It is, and really it goes back to control, it goes back to love, and it goes back to like being fully seen and being transparent and feeling safe with your heart open to the world.
Yeah.
When you feel safe to your heart open, being open at the world, you're essentially also very empowered, and you're very conscious. And so then you can receive more of anything that's important to you, anything that's in your heart, your desires, your intentions, the things that would support you, the things that you need, the things that you love, all of that. When you're open and you feel safe about having your heart open, and you're in a state of receiving, the universe, life, you can fulfill all of that rather than some of it.
Yeah.
You know, and what I feel with women sometimes, it's like when I wouldn't even say the receiving's low. We're trying to find a way to delineate this to where it makes sense. But when let's just say when the receiving is low, it's like, because my receiving is very good and I'm very sensitive, and I can feel things in women sometimes that they would really want, that they're not actually feeling. And so it's not registering inside me as an inspiration or impulse to give it to them. You see what I'm saying? And so, which means that they're not in love or in touch with the things that are deepest in their heart. That's another way to look at receiving.
Yeah. So how, because you've said that to me before, and you've said, I don't feel your desires, and I'm like, but they're there. Like, why can't I feel it? And I feel like I'm better at this, but this is for all the women. Like, why can't we feel it?
Because the depth of the feeling might have you if you were to sink into the depth of the feeling, you would probably have to go through other feelings that are uncomfortable before you actually arrive at the purest feeling that you can feel. So it's almost like, I know it's down there, but it's being muddled up by these other feelings. And the feelings, there's a resistance to the feelings. The thing about the feelings is the feelings that there's a resistance to are not based on truth, and so they're not actually real. But in order to transcend those feelings and to be able to feel more, if you have a fear of feeling a certain feeling, then it cuts off your ability to feel your own desires even. So like the example we used last night, if you have a man in your life and he really, really likes you, or even thinks he's in love with you and wants to be with you, but you're like, wow, I really don't feel the same way, and I don't want to hurt him, I don't want to reject him, I don't want to, or I rejected him in the past and I could feel his pain and I don't want to cause him pain, then now imagine you being in the moment of what you're perceiving as rejection, and imagine that moment where you start to feel him, and then you start to feel yourself and feel that pain. Well, let's put a color on that. I don't know where that came from, but let's just call it red. It's the color. It's like this red thing comes up and it's sitting there. If you can't take into your being and feel through that feeling, then you will unconsciously avoid ever getting to that point, which means that your feeling now of your own desires you can't fully receive even your own feelings because part of your feeling is being blocked by this feeling that you don't want to feel. But if you were to address that feeling, if you were to step into it, not avoid it, move into it, first of all, you'll find out it's not going to kill you. But once you go through the uncomfortability of it, and even you just sift through the judgment. I mean, there's many processes I won't get into on this call, but once you sift through that feeling, the charge comes off of it. It starts to dissolve. And once it dissolves, then you're feeling more. And when you're feeling more, you also start to recognize, remember, and be aware of your own desires that are tucked deep down inside you that you couldn't even feel. And that's why the people around you couldn't even feel them.
Yeah.
Because they've been layered over. So you might just be like, oh, hey, I would love it if, I don't know, maybe you gave me a call when you had a chance. But the translation might be, wow, I really don't want to be alone. And the deeper translation might be, wow, I really want to hug. And the deeper translation might be, wow, I just would feel really good if you were just with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can't articulate that with that level of clarity and, more importantly, with that level of embodiment and radiate out that that's your deepest truth if you cut yourself off from it.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Like, it feels like there's this thing. I mean, in that situation, that's a little bit different, that topic, but just say someone had a job that they really, really wanted. They were desperate to get into a certain industry, or really looking to call in a soulmate and relationship. It's something they really deeply want, but then there's so many danger points you have to go through. It's like this battle. So that's probably why women don't want to feel anything, because it's like, I'm exhausted. I can't keep going through these, what they may see as disappointments or danger points. Like,
I think that, and this isn't really just a woman thing, but I think, let's just say it's exaggerated for women. The feminine energy in general is very sensitive, very feeling oriented.
yeah,
And so imagine from a child, when you freely would embody, you would feel, be present to, and embody all of your desires, and you would freely communicate them. Mommy, I want ice cream. I want to watch a movie. I want to do this. I want to do that.
yeah,
And then what happens is, if your mom or dad or whoever the authority figure, somebody that you hold to be important, says something like, stop asking for that.
yeah,
But it's not what they say. It's that if they are in judgment in themselves and they project that energy that that's inappropriate, that it's wrong, then you're actually feeling how they feel.
yeah,
Rather than just feeling what they're saying, you're feeling how they feel. And then you start to, that's the thing that we wind up avoiding,
yeah,
especially with women, is because you don't want to feel that.
yeah.
It
Well,
feels like,
we're scared of feeling,
loss of love.
yeah, we're really scared of feeling our true desire for whatever reason, and it can go back to childhood or whatever, where we see there's a danger in feeling something. But
Right.
can I just touch on something? Because when I was talking about it feels exhausting because you got to go through this, I felt like that's the masculine, because it's like almost in my receiving, if there's something I really want to receive, then I feel like I have to do work to get it.
Right.
And I
Which is also,
because I'm like, I don't want to be masculine when I'm receiving.
right. It's very ironic because, first of all, it's not exhausting, and really, to just paint a picture, to just like exaggerate this to make a point, dare I say, if you think that's exhausting, it's way more exhausting to not do it.
I know, because it's resistance. And I also want to let people know as well, because this is something I've learned the most from Oren, is that it doesn't have to take work. In the personal development world, they're constantly saying you need to do the work. And I have friends all the time saying to me, oh, you've done the work. And I'm like, why we use that word? And it can be, the shifts I've had have been like that, just from an awareness, like just having something come up from my subconscious. So it is really, really simple to fix this.
Totally. And what's interesting about it is, like, we can look at receiving in terms of receiving support, receiving compliments, receiving our own desires, receiving relaxation, receiving certain, states of being like peace and joy. But receiving also applies to mastering the art of receiving. It also applies to increasing your ability to receive, because here's the thing. The moment you ask a question or state a desire, even if you say, man, I really, really, really want to receive more.
Mm.
The interesting thing is that the moment you send that desire out, and it's true and it's authentic and it has some thrust behind it, you say, I really want to know. You're like, how? In that same moment, what the feminine does in its purest form, what the receiving would be in that moment, would be able to sit with that moment. And when you're sitting in that space itself is the receiving, because in that space, thoughts can come to you, new knowledge can come to you, the answer can come to you. But what's uncomfortable to the mind or the ego or the masculine energy, which seeks control, is that the distance between when you ask the question, like, how do I do this? How do I work on my receiving? The irony when you're talking about receiving is effortless. It's so the work is, if there was a work, it would be, what effort do I have to put in to allow the effortlessness? And that's why technically it's not a lot of work, because it is more akin to surrender. It is more akin to letting go or allowing or effortlessness. But the only thing that we really are contending with is our mind's perception in the moment that, and this is the masculine energy, we'll just call it masculine, that's like, but wait a minute, if I ask a question or I state a desire and I, myself, within my limited confines of what I know, if I don't do anything, then nothing's going to happen. That's one of the biggest untrue things ever, and therefore, consequently, it's one of the most baffling, surprising, and miraculous things if you make it through that point where it seems like nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden, it's like when you're trying to remember someone's name, you're like, that's the masculine.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't want to let it go, and then you let it go, and then where does it come from? It comes from the space, and that space is also a way to describe receiving.
Yeah. You used the word allowing, and I wonder whether, and I was thinking this just before you said it, is allowing the same as receiving, or allowing is just an element of receiving?
Allowing is the same as receiving in terms of the quality of it as a state of being. I think that allowing could be also used in a more formed sense, like I'm allowing this person the space to speak. Do you know what I mean? Like allowing has a little bit more range, but the energetic quality of allowing is the same as receiving, in the sense that it's effortless, in the sense that it's graceful, in the sense that there's no trying happening. There's no it's a resistance-free state.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. Allowing, the word resonates with me in such a more resistant state, and it feels like just sitting back. Whereas receiving, I think for so many people, has all these, things around it. But if people can see it as the same, and just allowing life to happen, allowing God to flow through us, just allowing.
Which is, to the masculine aspect, the masculine aspect doesn't like allowing, because it looks like failure. It looks like weakness. I mean, these are just false beliefs.
Yeah.
It looks like failure, weakness, passiveness, giving up, nothing's going to happen. But that's also why we're so attracted to the feminine. Even though we feel like we can't control it because it's so vast, we're also drawn to it. We're drawn to its mystery. We're drawn to its magic. That's why we're drawn to things like the flow. It's like, wow, when I let go of my control for a moment, all of these unexpected things happen. And it seems to be every time I let go of control, things happen. And so that's where we get into this tug of war between, like, well, when do I let go? When do I not? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So really a very practical, we love talking about the practical, very practical thing for women to do is just to allow and ask that question, how can I, or how do I allow this into my life, or how can I attract, and not think about it, just let it go.
I think that one other thing that's occurring on the practical level right now, and a lot of women are doing this, is really being vulnerable, because when you're vulnerable, even though it might feel uncomfortable because of your own judgment, vulnerability is still a very resistant free space. Even if there's resistance, because you're accepting the resistance, because you're not judging it, it's still a very fluid space. It's a very heart opening space. And so vulnerability is a very powerful idea or tool that increases your receiving. And the way that looks in the physical world of speaking it, then it opens up and gives life the opportunity to synchronize with you in whichever ways are appropriate, whether that's giving you a hug, giving you some information, helping you out with a thing that you're feeling frustrated about or feeling fearful about. So vulnerability is a huge avenue that's easy to implement of receiving, and it really just comes down to being brave enough and courageous enough to be more honest about your whole experience, not just what you're doing, but what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what your heart's deepest desire is, and what your fears are. When you can radiate that, that's on a level of being. But let's just say we're trying to look at an exercise. When you can exercise that and be more thorough and more, with communicating that and sharing that with the key people around you, people who are important to you. And I'm only saying that if you want to play with this in spaces that you feel like are safe versus with strangers or at your work.
Yeah.
Then you're significantly opening up your receiving, because now, it's like the example I gave earlier. You're saying, I want this, or you're asking this question, but really deep down, you just want a hug.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody's able to give you the hug when you're vulnerable, because they can feel that that's what you want.
Yeah.
Because you're feeling it.
Yeah.
That's huge in receiving, is just feeling your feelings without stories, labels, or judgments on them, just feeling them. And if they have words or thoughts associated with them, share them. Share them.
And I feel like one thing that I've learned from you as well is how it's just the little things as well, like just owning up to your feelings and not people pleasing and speaking your mind, how that opens you up for so many other things. And I'll give the example to everyone. Remember that time we were on the mastermind call, and then I was done. Like, we'd been on the call for a few hours, and I was scared to say, I've got to go now, because I was like, well, that's rude. And the moment you challenged me to hang up, and the moment I decided, yeah, it's time for me to go, it doesn't serve me to be in this call anymore. Like, something shifted in me, and then I was able to receive information and receive inspiration, and it's all these little things in every area of our life, that just owning up to your truth and what's right for you, and not just trying to judge it or people please.
Yeah, and I would say, in light of what I just said, 2 levels of doing that. One is you already have owned up to it, and then you just speak it like,
yeah,
I need to go. But if you can't access that, or if you feel like you can't access that, then your next great opportunity is vulnerability. And that looks like, I feel like I need to go right now, but I feel like I might be upsetting you.
Yeah. And maybe that was more powerful than the actual me just saying, I've got to go now. It was just like, but I feel like I'm being rude. I don't want to do this. Yeah.
Right, because when you use your energy to hide the fact that you feel like you're being rude, then that's where the exhaustion's coming from. Not to mention, because it's true that you feel that way, the very fact that you won't say it means that you're not receiving yourself, you're not loving yourself, and you're actually negating something that's true for you.
Yeah, because we're judging. And I wanted to just touch on this as well, and this is such a deep conversation. We could talk about this for hours and hours, but just how much judgment we have towards our feelings, that we're conditioned to think that some things are right or wrong to feel. It's like if someone has a really deep desire in their heart, but they don't want to own up to it, or they don't understand it, and they have judgment around it. I mean, how much does that block us from experiencing love and experiencing the universe flowing through us?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, we're making, just giving different angles to this and looking at, but that's another thing that's huge. It's like being able to feel and not judging your feelings actually it's what deepens your receiving. And it's actually what expands your consciousness. The less judgment you have on the feelings that you're having, and I've used this example before, but it's like a baby. When a baby is like laughing in one moment, crying in the next, screaming in the next, the baby's not going, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Oh, the other kids aren't crying. Oh, what are they going to think of me? Do you know what I mean? Those are stories.
Yeah.
And that's why they can pass through feelings,
Yeah.
you know, so much more fluidly, or pass through emotions, feelings. So just being more intentional and more committed to being in touch with your feelings and sharing that with yourself and sharing that with other people, that's a very good practice that deepens your receiving.
Yeah.
Because it's like trying to put stories around feelings is ridiculous, because everything that we're saying about our feeling in terms of a belief or a story is bullshit. It's like we just make stuff up.
We do.
And then once you make up one thing and you start to build on that idea, you're screwed, because now you've created a whole ripple effect and you create an entire reality around one judgment of one feeling that created one perception that's off. And now it's like, well, the worst part is when we think it's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And really, it's like once you're in that, then you're trying to solve problems that aren't real because they're an effect of the original thing. Then you're asking yourself questions that really aren't the question that's going to get you anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's crazy.
But when you get to the right question, just as a tool, when you get to the right question, the question that's going to bring forth the life that's being trapped, or bring forth the answer, it feels a certain way.
Yeah.
It's like, this is really the question.
Yeah.
And when you get in touch with that feeling, guess what? All you're doing is receiving yourself. In that moment, if it's blocked, you could essentially call it your higher self or another part of yourself, but it's still yourself. And that's why, like, deep beneath all these layers, sometimes we always know. We know what's best for us.
Yeah.
We know.
And that's what I really feel passionate about, connecting women to that feeling, because we do know. We always know. We don't need to seek that from anyone else. And it just came to me how if we can't receive ourselves, how can we receive God or the universe and the gifts from the universe? And I think that's where a huge block is for a lot of people, is that they're not receiving themselves because they didn't even know they needed to.
Put it this way: when you're really deeply in receiving, which means you're really allowing the flow of love, then it's so vast it can include everything and everyone. That's how massive it is. And so, if you're a perpetual giver and you're taking your attention and constantly giving to people, but you're negating your own desires that are tucked down deep inside you, then you'll deplete yourself much faster. Eventually you'll get resentful. You'll have times where you're giving where you're like, people don't really get me. These are signs. People don't really appreciate me. They're not really appreciating the time if you're saying to yourself, especially if it happens a few times, like, man, this person I care about, I'm lending so much of my attention and my energy to them, and it feels like they don't appreciate it. That's a dead giveaway. You're not receiving. And there's something in that same moment that you're wanting, that you need or want or would love to have, that you're backed up on, and you've been ignoring it, and it's trying to get your attention. And because you're giving your attention, when your attention's trying to be drawn to you, but instead you're not looking at you, you're looking outside of you, and keep giving. When you keep giving in that space, it'll create the feeling of resentment and lack of appreciation. And really, the people who aren't appreciating you are doing you a favor, because they're pointing you back inside yourself, or hopefully they are. If they don't, then you'll keep trying to please them in different ways and keep failing at it, and that's exhausting. But the exhaustion's not coming from the giving. The exhaustion's coming because you're lacking the flow of life that is your own desire is trying to be met. That's where the fuels come. The fuel to give is also coming from you receiving and including yourself in that. It's, I mean, a very cliche standard example is like, okay, if you're a vessel, you got to take care of the vessel. And I think that the going back to the archetypes, the caretaker woman archetype, it was probably designed or presented in such a way of being selfless, you know, or take care of everybody. So I think that psychologically, not that this has to affect any woman, but psychologically in our collective psyche, you know, that probably, I bet back in the day, how it would be like, you know, you wouldn't dare think about what do you need. You know, you got to take care of the village, the family, the kids, or whatever. It's not about what you need.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work in this day and age.
Yeah.
Not even close.
This probably leads into a question that I also wanted to touch on, topic that I wanted to touch on, and it is giving, because, you know, giving and receiving are just the same energy, but on the opposite end of the scale. And that's something, my aha moment with you, when I realized that I thought, oh, I just give and give and give and I'm not receiving, but then I could see how controlled I was in my giving.
Yeah, and that one hurt.
That was a big one for me.
That and again, I'm not going to put it as black or white. I'll put it on a scale of love, a scale of purity. But when you're needing to receive and you're giving and you're negating your own desires, then your giving is not as pure as you think it is.
No. And even, I think when I was talking about it with you, when it first came up, it was like, okay, I looked at the situations where I feel like I've given, that person's taken and I haven't received. I had to look at, why was I giving? And a lot of it was because it was people pleasing, and it was fear of abandonment, and it was, you know, doing something for someone because I felt like if I didn't, then they wouldn't be my friend anymore, or because I didn't want to say no and I couldn't say no, but really I was resenting them because I was giving. And so if I could see that there was so much control in my giving, it wasn't pure, then of course my receiving is.
Right. It's like if you're controlling your receiving to keep yourself safe unconsciously or for whatever, then you're probably controlling your giving.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. It's like, that's to keep us safe too, really. It's like,
right,
giving to people please, it's like we don't want them to leave us, so we're avoiding that feeling of abandonment and fear.
And I think the reason the controlling your giving is a more painful realization is because we like to, because deep down in our heart there is a place where our giving is pure, and we know it, and we can feel it, and we're in touch with it.
Yeah.
We like to think that that's where we're sharing from. And so it can be a little bit of a, you know, painful realization to realize, wow, I'm actually have a bit of an agenda here unconsciously. I'm not purely giving right now. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be that person. One other thing I want to say while it's just fresh on my mind, and we can get right back to this point, because I want to hit some of these receiving highlights that I see with women. I mean, it's a vast subject, but another probably big misunderstanding or realization that a lot of women have in this area is they don't see the value of receiving, or not receiving, the value of the feminine energy in the world in its purest form. When I say its purest form, I mean in its formless form. So, for example, you just sitting here listening, if I was sharing with you, you know, it's like, I'll give you two examples. One is a very masculine and one's a very feminine example. It would be like if I sat down and said, I have a problem right now, or I want to start a new business, and these are my objectives. And so a masculine approach would be, somebody sits down with me, a guy sits down with me and is a consultant and says, I have some business background, I have some this, I have some that, and he helps me, and I'm like, mission accomplished. That was valuable. It has value in the marketplace. You can charge for it, everything, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with coaching. Like, I do coaching and consulting, but here's where I see very few women, this connects in their knowing and in their being, how the same level of experiential value can be had by a woman who's just in her feminine and just sits in front of me and just listens. I meet very few women who, like, if I intellectually, they might go, oh yeah, I know that's valuable. And even in their knowing intuitively, that's deepening. It's like, okay, no, I don't just understand its value. I know its value. But to embody that, very few women embody that. And that's why, like, and I've actually experienced this with women before too, maybe even with you at one point, where the greatest value my soul is seeking from, I'll just use you an example because you're a woman sitting here. The greatest value that my soul is seeking is in the pure, formless essence and presence of the feminine energy. And I've been in that situation with a woman where that's what's trying to be called forth. But the woman, because she's not fully receiving that as valuable, which means she's not fully receiving herself, is trying or trying to do something that is agreed upon or recognized as valuable, because generally speaking, because the masculine is more energy can be more physicalized in that sense, our collective opinion on that is that we've associated more value with it. And that to me, it's the inspiring part of that conversation for women out there is to realize, to recognize, and to know, and ultimately to feel deeply. I would wish that on any woman, to feel deeply how valuable it feels to people, to men, we'll just say, when you can just be in your feminine essence, when you, and I'm only saying you, the masculine part of you, think you're doing nothing. But to the man or to the person, it's everything.
Yeah. And I felt that energy. I felt that from you of, like, you know, I guess in our relationship over the last year, how that's evolved, and how at first it was like, oh, I've got to give you input, I've got to do this. And then just feeling how much you appreciated just me sitting there, and how that was inspiring you, and how that allowed you to, you know, download more information, and
Yeah,
I could feel so much value in it.
Yeah, the inspirational version of that is, I mean, if you wanted to put a form around it, not that you have to, but the form would be like a muse. That's like a muse.
Yeah.
A muse is like a woman who's in this feminine essence, who just her very presence inspires creativity, innovation, and movement.
And also, I told you about this experience, but I'll share it with everyone else. You know, I recently went to this it was a Tantra Kundalini dance thing, and there was an exercise with the men there, and we had to do one exercise where they would just stand there, and we would have to be kind of seductive and dance around them, like how women usually are. They're a little bit manipulative with their energy, and trying to get something from the man and getting their attention and trying to be sexy or whatever. And then we had to switch it to just be us, and just be seen in the feminine in front of the man, and we could do that in whichever way we chose. And I remember just standing in front of the man, and I didn't dance, I didn't do anything. It was just like allowing myself to be seen as the feminine, and the reaction from the men was mind-blowing. Like, when we were trying to be sexy, it was like, oh yeah, they could kind of, like, they were trying to hold their own kind of thing. But when we just were there in the feminine, they had tears in their eyes. They were so grateful and so thankful, and so drawn to us. It was probably one of the most amazing things I've experienced, and it made me feel like I wish women could just be more of this, because they don't have to be the other thing. Because the other thing is manipulativity, is masculine energy. It's not always needed. There's a time and place to be sexy, but I think women, it's like the men were just so seeking that so much, and they hadn't felt that from a woman for so long, probably.
What you said about being sexy, here's how I would make a distinction when we're talking about receiving. When you're in a state of receiving, your sexiness becomes an expression from your soul of something that feels inspiring to you, and then you're sharing that. Versus being sexy in order to receive something.
And I don't think any woman ever really even feels good in that state anyway, you know, because they're trying to be, and that doesn't feel real.
And guess what? If a woman's in that state and does it and attracts a man, then she's going to be disappointed at some point at this is a scenario where she gets the man who's like, I just feel like he really doesn't know me. It feels so shallow. It's like he can't even feel me. Well, of course he can't feel you because you didn't feel you, which is why you tried to make yourself something in the first place, and then you manifested somebody on the same level, and so it's all physicalized. But then you wind up being disappointed, so you don't attract a man who's going to appreciate who you really are if you're not appreciating who you really are, if you're compensating for yourself, versus if you are so interested and so in a state of receiving that is inspiring all these different expressions. One of them being, man, I feel sexy right now. It's like if you feel sexy to you, you don't have to do anything. It's effortless.
Exactly. Because the feminine energy is so sexy when you really feel into it.
Right.
It is the most beautiful feeling. And I can see that would relate not just to relationships or attracting a man, but that would be the same in a job. If you were going after a job in a particular type of energy, and then you gain that job, and then you are burnt out with adrenal fatigue and all the rest of it, and you're like, I'm so unhappy, what went wrong? It's like, okay, you're attracting based on where you're at the time.
Yeah, I say, like, stay with like, connected to the receiving, and magnetism is so much more efficient, true, effective. To me, it's everything. And then from that, you may, like, if you're going to a job, you may have specific skills and different things that are valuable within that position. But it's like, this is what makes a difference. I'll use acting as an example. One of the things that makes a huge difference in the realm of acting and, like, going on auditions, you can be a great actor and, like, play a character very well. And okay, you're going to already rise up in the ranks in acting, right? But it's that legendary zone, that zone where it's like where all the actors fantasize about being at and being in the movies and the movie star. I guarantee you, consciously or unconsciously, the people who are on that level are receiving themselves. Yeah. And even if themselves is their own delusional idea about how badass they are, they're still receiving themselves. Yeah. Then they become a self-contained universe that's magnetic. Yeah. And if your receiving's really open and you can act, then that's when somebody's like, what is it about her? Mm-hmm. It's like, why am I drawn to her? Because it's like, you become a beacon, a magnet for everything to happen. Not just what you've got going on, but it's almost like your space can fulfill everyone's dreams, and people are, like, drawn to you and drawn into that vortex because it can fulfill.
Wouldn't that be amazing? To be in that space where you are fulfilling everyone's dreams. So if you're living your soul purpose and you're listening to your heart and going after your dreams and being in that state of receiving, that is such a gift to everyone else. So that's when we're receiving, and then we're giving to so many people. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's another great reason why there's so much value and so much leverage in working on your receiving, because it influences so many other areas of our life. Even what I do, like, I would say that the source of my own gift being able to be shared in the world in the way that I do is actually coming from my receiving. Yeah. It is. Even the things everything I said to you on this call, I'm not working off of a script, but because I'm receiving, and I'm receiving myself, and I'm receiving from my truth, I have access not just to Oren's mind and Oren's wisdom, which are valuable, but I have access to infinite intelligence. That's what receiving is what opens us up to intuitive knowledge. And so much of what I'm saying is just coming through me, but it's because I'm in a state of receiving. But if I was trying to do a good interview, or, had a concept, then I would be limited to my own identity and my own what I know. And that's why, like, the masculine energy can also be sometimes associated with the ego, because it has to fulfill itself. It has to conquer. It has to say, I figured this out, It has to. So, but when you move into the feminine energy to go deeper into it, you have to let those. You have to let those things go, and let the pride go. But when you let the pride go and you move into that space, that's when the whole entire universe opens up to you.
I think this topic is as vast as the universe, and it is a game changer for women and for men. So I would love for you to come back and share with us some more and be our teacher in this topic. Are you happy to come back and talk more about this?
Yes, I'm delighted to. I'm delighted to.
Yeah.
Because because I'm passionate about the subject, because I know you, and because of your receiving.
Yeah.
Like, even your receiving is contributing to my inspiration
Yeah.
on this call right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a vacuum. It's like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So one final question.
Okay.
And you have, it's interestingly, you've kind of answered, the conversation's been flowing really nicely of the things that I wanted to ask.
Because you're receiving.
Exactly. What does life look like when you're fully present to the receiving energy?
When you're present to it, or when you're in it,
When
you're embodying it?
Yeah, when you're embodying it, sorry.
Life looks graceful, charming, connected. Life feels rich, deeply more sensational. Life is more alive. There's much more of the support and collaborators, co-creators. You become aware of them. You get to experience, not only are you not a burden to somebody, but it's actually their joy. They're actually wishing, hoping, waiting to give to you, to collaborate with you. You become a space that invites people deeper into their hearts. You become a space where miracles can occur, because miracles exist beyond the mind. And when you're in a state of receiving, you're not limited by your mind. You're more in depth than that. And in the situation of men, you become a transformational force that can open men's hearts, that can melt their hearts to reveal to them more of their own greatness, more of their own love.
Which I think we will go really deep onto that topic later.
Yeah, that's another big one.
Yeah.
Way more synchronicities happen, which is just like being in the right place at the right time. I was just thinking of that and feeling that, and there it is that shows up. Wow, what a coincidence. This was so perfect and right on time, and I and my mind didn't plan it. That, like, synchronicities just multiply. Every time you deepen in your receiving, the synchronicities, which we call magic sometimes because we don't understand it, and because that's just kind of one of the words we use. Wow, this is so magical. Life gets way more magical. Intimacy deepens. And because we fundamentally love connection between human beings, intimacy deepens in our interpersonal relationships, in our romantic relationships. And if intimacy deepens in because our receivings deepen and our heart's more open, our flow, our energetic system's so much more alive. So the pleasure, like the height of pleasure, exponentially expands on how much, like, bodily energetic pleasure you can feel in terms of sensuality and ecstasy off the charts.
That's another whole. We could do
That's a whole other
on every single one of these.
Yeah, that's just a little rampage on what you have to look forward to and why. One last area, because it just kind of organically I addressed a wide range of areas in terms of your business and your creations. Whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working for somebody, like, your level of productivity exponentially expands because you're so much more efficient, innovative, creative, clear, like, yeah. So whatever investment one would consider making on receiving in terms of their time, energy, or if they're spending money to, like, really work in on this area or listen to this video, just like the return on the investment is not linear, it's exponential. Because if you expand your receiving by 10%, it's not just like, affects one area of your life, it affects everything I just said.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, well, we have so much to look forward to. We have so much to really embody and take in. So thank you so, so much for chatting with us.
And may I say one more thing as a representing all men on earth right now?
Yes.
When you're looking through the eyes of your heart, through your spiritual eyes, and I'm speaking to this part of you right now, all women out there, trust me when I say whether I can be in touch with it and feel it, or be conscious of it, or even be able to articulate it or not, the men want you to be in your fullness, want you to be in that receiving, want your heart to be open. And it's really such a gift to not just to men, but to the planet right now. And you're doing a huge service to the planet and to men. And even if people don't know how to articulate and say, I want that from you, or even if they appear to say, oh, wow, that scares me, or I don't want it, trust me, we do want it.
Yeah.
And when a woman's in that state where she's deeply receiving, it's breathtaking.
Yeah.
And such a massive gift and so transformational. And I could go on. And like the world is like asking you for that.
Yeah. Can you, ladies,
more of that?
Can you just feel that? Feel how this is something we really, really need to embody. And this is a movement. It really is. It really is. That we just need to awaken that within us. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I've enjoyed it.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.